is Hillary here with Waterlogged again today, and I've got a super, super special guest for you. This is Cristina Zenato, and I've been following her on Instagram for I don't even know how long. Like, I remember seeing these crazy photos of you with these sharks underwater, and it just blows me away. And then, I know a lot of people on Instagram these days, they just look at the picture and they don't read the captions. But if you take the time to read Christina's captions, the stories that are behind it is just phenomenal. So, Cristina, thank you so much for joining me. Why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Hillary, and thank you for having me. Well, like you said, my name is Cristina Zenato. I'm originally from Italy, but I've been living and working in the Bahamas, specifically on Grand Bahama Island, for the last 26 years. By trade, I'm a diving professional, but maybe we can explore a little bit more what this being diving professional actually entails. I speak 5 languages. That is my background and my studies. English, one of them. My first language is Italian, English, German, French, Spanish, and some people may say I speak shark as well.
I like that, speaking shark. All right. So, what you do, I guess, what does your average day look like?
My average day. So my average day starts around 5 or 5:30 in the morning, depending on the day. It has a component which is life, like everyone else. I have 3 dogs, so wake up, take the dogs out for a walk, go and exercise for myself, open the computer, work on social media, emails, answering, and all of that. And then it has a component that varies from day to day. So there's some days where you'll find me working with sharks, some days where you find me maybe working with training instructors or professionals, and some days where you find me training people into the technical world. And maybe a mix of those, as well as maybe the half a days where I'm sitting on a computer and doing that part of the job that everybody thinks that maybe my secretary does, but I am my own secretary. So the water component is different depending on the day. And it usually ends physically around 6:30 p.m., followed by either a yoga session or taking the pups for another long walk. And then usually I crash around 9 p.m. That's my day. I always tell people like when it's characteristic days, it has this very 2 first components. The beginning and the end are very kind of like similar. During the day, I am dependent on weather. I am dependent on boats. I'm dependent on animals. I'm dependent on people. And so I just adapt to how the day actually unfolds.
That makes sense. That's a good way to think about it. So if you are spending your day in the water with the sharks, right? So you work with the Caribbean reef sharks?
Yes, Caribbean reef sharks and nurse sharks are the prevalent sharks in the area where I work with.
So what kind of work do you do with them? I've seen one of your presentations before, but for people who might not be familiar with your work, what all do you do?
So the primary job that I do is actually shark tourism. I interact with the Caribbean reef sharks to entertain divers who want to see sharks. And when I first started, it was doing a shark dive. So I will have a group of people that came on a shark dive to watch what I was doing with the sharks and then be surrounded by the sharks. But then a few years into that, I also developed a course. It's called a shark handling course. I also created a little experience. And so what I really specialize in is taking people on this interactive one-on-one experience with me, where they can actually be in the center of the sharks, and I call it shark yourself, and they can reach out and connect. And so I talk about shark behavior and obviously introduce a shark conservation. And so I have people that have come literally from all over the world. I think just the only place they didn't come from is Antarctica for obvious reasons, but to actually be in the water with the sharks under my guidance to have this kind of unique experience that you cannot have anywhere else in the world. With that then comes all the other work that I do behind that, which is shark research, data collection, photogrammetry, having like cataloging all the sharks, behavioral scientific data collection, and cooperating with people that maybe want to utilize some of these specifics of being with the sharks for their own research. And then obviously comes the biggest component, which is not only when I'm in the water, but primarily when I'm out of the water, which is the conservation part. So I worked very hard to have the sharks protected in the Bahamas, and then I still do this hook removal, for which many people consider me famous, but I do remove hooks from the shark's mouth of the sharks that I work with. So they'll show up with a hook, and I'll reach out and remove the hooks. One, to alleviate the animals that I'm uh, familiar with, that I love so much, from the real pain of having a hook embedded in their jaws and their throat and their fins and their gills. I mean, I've seen some hooks embedding on the back of the eye, so very painful places. But then this has acquired like a different meaning. It has really shown people the fact that sharks have the capability of hurting, and actually they're vulnerable to our presence. So it goes into like conservation and all the education that I do behind that.
Wow. Now, probably jumping ahead a few questions. So, do you keep track of the number of hooks that you take out?
Yes and no. So I have now all the hooks that I've been removing in the last maybe decade, but before that I used to remove them, and at first I used to throw them in the trash. It was just like really this horrifying job. The hooks, and throw it in the trash because I didn't want anyone to reuse it. I had, somebody on the boat was like, "Oh, why don't you give it back to the fishermen?" I'm like, "No," but then I started giving them away. People will be so excited about, "Oh, the hooks! Can I please have one?" And so I would hand the hooks off on the boat to the people that witnessed this removal, and then I start collecting them. And so now I have them like in a box as a collective to show different things, to show the power of what one person can do. I do believe in the power of one. I do believe we are all what I call star throwers, related to the story of the star thrower. So we may not be able to save the world, but I do believe we can make a world of a difference for an individual or for a creature that we take care of, but also to represent, obviously, in the collective, like our pressure and influence on the oceans and specifically the sharks, but as being there. And so it just becomes like an ambassadorship kind of tool that I use.
That's pretty cool. Now, I don't know that much about hooks. Are they all the same type and shape of hook, or are they different?
Hooks can be very different. So the traditional hooks that are maybe the one that have been existed for a long time, they're called the J hook, right? It's shaped like a J. And these ones actually are more dangerous for the animals because they're easier to be ingested and swallowed, obviously causes some damages into the stomach. There's also another hook shape, which is called the circular hook. So if you notice, like that's the difference in the shape. So this one is actually designed to embed itself deeper into the shark's mouth, and then there's less risk for the shark to swallow it, right? Should like the line break or anything like that. But obviously then this becomes for me a harder hook to remove. It's harder to grasp, it's harder to remove because it is designed to embed itself deeper. So it has a certain disadvantage. Let's say out there's a shark with a circular hook, there's a 99% chance that it will not dislodge and be swallowed versus a J hook. But then in my line of work is like, I cannot stand circular hooks. When I see circular hooks, I know they're extremely difficult to remove. One of the most difficult part is the barb, obviously, the little barb here,
Yep.
because the shark skin is very tough. It's extremely tough. And so when it becomes stuck into the shark skin, it's not that you can just push pull and it comes off. It's like almost stuck onto leather. But the most damaging one is not simply just the shape of the hook, but is what the hooks, for example, trail behind, right? So this is a pound and a half,
Oh my
right?
gosh.
So now you have the hook embedded into a shark's mouth or cheek or whatever, and this pulls on it. So as it swims, it wobbles and pulls and creates like all sorts of like lacerations. This one is not only 2 pounds heavy, I actually weighted it with my little scale, but it also has, let me see, because I kept the line for this one, but it's a very long line. And so now you have, and you have to see it to understand. You have the shark with the hook and all this line trailing behind. Well, this is wobbling through the water, which is
Oh,
attracting a lot of other predators. So there's a shark now with a shark hook embedded in the mouth, and other sharks, for example, biting this and then release it. But as they bite, they pull, right? And it jerks the hook further into the shark's mouth, for example. So when I see these, I always try to remove them. I, I tell people, I said, yeah, I can't save all the sharks in the world, but obviously the one I work with, if I can relieve their pain, I will do that. So these are the worst ones. Is the one with like the heavy weights. The most dangerous ones for me to attempt to remove, are the triple hooks. Um, and I'm not a fisherman, so I don't know what they are, but they're built together. So now you have, this is a triple hook plus a weight, so joy. But like the hook goes inside the shark's mouth here, right? And then these are flopping. So when I go try to remove the hook, right, my hand is so close to this, and I wear the change suit, I'm extreme high risk of becoming entangled into the following hooks.
yeah,
Uh,
no.
which it's a risk, because if the shark jerks away, then I end up having my hand jerking away with the sharks. So they're all different, and they also depend on where they're positioned. If they're like right on the side, those are a little bit easier. If you're like onto the palate, those are the hardest ones, almost impossible to remove. If they're down in the bottom, they're a little bit easier. If they're brushing the gills, they might be easy, but I have to be careful not to damage the gills as well. Um,
Wow. That's a whole lot more about shark or about hooks than I really ever knew. And it's crazy how just like small little differences in the shapes can cause such different
and quite a
impacts.
lot of different impact, right? When I see a circle or hook, I know it's going to be a lot of work, quite a lot of work.
Now, when you say a lot of work, is that something you can do all in, like, say, one dive, or is that multiple dives?
So, yeah, that's a very good question. Some hooks come out on the first attempt. I have hooks that maybe the way they're placed, and now the shark is swimming, they're coming towards me, and I push pull, and the hook comes out. Some hooks require dives, not one dive, but several dives. Some hooks requires weeks, depending on where they're positioned, how the shark reacts as I try to attempt to remove the hook. Some sharks, most of the sharks actually, keep coming back. So they don't sit there because they don't understand the concept, oh, I'm sitting there and it hurts and it's going to get better. So they'll swim away, but they keep doing this a circle of turns and allow me to try again. But when it hurts too much, some sharks may go away for the rest of the dive. And then it takes me another dive to convince them to come in and say, hey, coming in, here's the fish, it's not going to hurt. So it depends on where the hook is and the level of damage that it's doing. It might take from 2 minutes to a whole dive for one hook. I remember at the end of a shark dive, I removed the 5 hooks in less than 10 minutes.
Whoa.
It was just, in a certain way, luck, and it was so good. It felt so good that I removed the 5. And sometimes there's a hook that I try for 5 dives and it doesn't come out, and it takes my sixth dive to remove. So
Wow. Are you the only one that is able to remove? Because I know sometimes obviously you are going to have at least one other person while you're down there, probably multiple people. Does anybody else help to remove hooks, or are you the only one that they?
no, I have a couple of staff members that help as well. They try. Um, as I tell people email me and they say, "Oh, I want to come and do that." And it's like, well, even my staff members, it took me, a couple of years to work with the sharks and then say, "Okay, I'm going to try to remove hooks." Sometimes they help me in the terms of like they redirect the shark, or sometimes we work as a team. Like, two of us will try to remove the hook at once. So there's a couple of guys that actually work on removing hooks as well. They have like quite a few, 5, 6 of their own. So it's actually really cool to see that they try. Then usually when they're really, really difficult, I receive, the message show up at work and the guys go, and there's a hook waiting for you. Meaning I'm not going to try, but it's there waiting for you. So there's quite a lot of that has happened through the years. I'll train people, they'll do the job I do because I cannot be the only one doing what I do for the tourists. So there's a lot of other not a lot, but like there's 2 or 3 people that can do the shark tourism dive. But then if I'm on the dive, they'll say, okay, can you remove these hooks? And some is experiences, some is just they know that some of the hooks I have a little bit more capabilities. Some of it could be also, I mean, there is an inherent risk of uh, uh, being hurt, not from the bite itself, just from the jerk movement, from the becoming trapped, a quick twist, a push back, or anything like that. So you may end up with a sore wrist or sore fingers, or it's part, I think, of the job that you do. So
That's fair. Makes sense. Let me
it
see.
doesn't scare me, but there are hooks in which I try a couple of times and I'm thinking, well, is it really worth my shoulder? Is it really worth my elbow? And so I have to say, you know what, I have to wait until the hook settles differently or till something happens, and then I can try 2 or 3 maybe dives later. So there's also that evaluation to be done.
Now, I obviously you've removed probably hundreds of them. What has been your most memorable one?
There's two memorable one was Foggy Eye. She was one of the sharks that showed up on the dive, but and interacted with me. Some of my sharks like to lay in my lap and allow me to pet them, but Foggy Eye was not one of those. Sharks decide which one wants to come and be pet, and I have a core of 3, 4 that wants to do that, and the other ones just interact on the dive. They allow me to pet them like this, but they will never sit in my lap. Kind of like people ask me if I compare them to dogs, and I said, no, more like a cat. There's the cat that will walk over you, maybe sit in your lap, but then you might have a cat, if you're a cat owner, that doesn't like to sit in your lap, and that's okay. Right? So Foggy I never liked to sit in my lap, and then one day she showed up with a hook on the side of her mouth, and I removed that as she was swimming by. And then 3 days later, she showed up and had a wire coming out of her mouth, and I verified that the hook was inside her mouth. How I did that is basically as she was coming towards me, I will open her jaw
Oh my
and
goodness.
see the hook inside. And then after 35, 40 minutes of this ballet between her and I, ooh, where's the hook? And she would swim away, come back, and all that. I literally shoved my hand inside her throat and removed the hook. And when I did that, from that day on, from that specific dive on, Foggy Eye became one of those sharks that will come and lay in my lap. I beyond what the other girls do. Like I'll be standing there and all of a sudden I will feel pressure on my leg and she'll be leaning into me and say, hey, hi, can you pet me? And it was like this instant change on the hook change. The other one that I remember really, really well was Grandma's hook. Grandma had a hook into her mouth and then had this kind of wire. This is like metal twisted wire. It is really like it's metal, right? And it was coming from her mouth. I couldn't see it in her mouth, but you could see parts of the hook, like maybe um, I could see. So this is the hook and this is the trail line. I could see this part coming
Mhm.
out of her gill slits, right? So I knew the hook, they have 5 gill slits. I knew the hook was into the gills, so come through her mouth, into their gills, and this part was coming out. But it's not that I can just pull because I didn't know where this part was. And I can't honestly, pull and just rip her gills off. But what the wire did, as it rubbed on the side, it created an infection on the entire side of Grandma. And it's an infection that lasted almost the 3 months that it took me to finally be able to remove the hook. And the only way I was able to remove it is finally one day I had her in my lap and she was relaxed enough because the hook was making her absolutely uncomfortable. When the wire touches them, they keep twitching. The fins are like, and then they glide down in the sand and they try to scratch against the sand, almost like a bear scratching against the tree, to get rid of this sensation of this foreign object that is constantly, flopping on their body. Not everybody can relate, but as women with long hair, if you have a hair trapped between the shirt and your back, it's
Yep.
going to drive you absolutely insane. So imagine having a wire that constantly taps, on your pectoral fin. So they go down in the sand and trying to kind of like alleviate this sensation of this foreign thing that they don't understand. and she had this huge infection. And so what happened is the day I was able to remove the hook, because the hook had moved enough that I could see it was like this, right?
Oh,
And so I actually saw, and I saw the eyelet was like this, and I'm like, okay, the hook is vertical. You can see the eyelet. If it's like this, it's in. But when I saw that it was like this, I'm like, okay, it's horizontal. And I gently kind of like opened her gill and pulled it out. And her infection healed in 2 weeks. Gone.
wow. Holy cow, that's incredible.
She had also started to lose weight. And I think it was just because of this infection and fasciitis. And after that, she had healed and started putting on weight again as well. So those are the two of the many that I remember. I have another one. I don't have specifically the hook that I remember, but is Black Spot. He is a male, and he lives on the reef. He's been around for about 6 years now, and he lives on the reef, but never comes on the interactive dive unless he has a hook. So when he has a hook, all of a sudden it comes. The reason why we call him Black Spot is because he has, instead of having a cat eye, he has a completely black eye, like a black spot out of the Pirates of the Caribbean story. So he's a pirate, when the pirates country, black spot pirates. So I call them Black Spot. But Black Spot, when I see him on the dive, I'm like, where's the hook? And then once you remove the hook, he goes away and lives around the reef, but not on the interactive dive. And then when he has another hookups, he show up again.
That's awesome. It's so cool though how that they know and associate you with this positive, slightly maybe painful experience that you're going to take the hook out if you see them, if they come to you, that, it's just crazy that they know.
Yeah, well, it is and it is not. For me, it's one of those things is like, what else don't we know about sharks? What else we don't really understand about the magnitude of this animal? Why, when I start removing hooks from the sharks I know, sharks that I don't know show up in the outer skirts of the interaction with hooks in their mouth, kind of like, hey, is this, the dentist that strolled into town today? And it makes us think about, how do they communicate. People are like, well, how do they communicate? I was like, well, I don't really know, but we know that they communicate through, for example, hormones. So they exude hormones. So maybe in the moment that there is this interaction, which is painful, which is agitated, which is very fast, where I remove the hooks, what the shark secretes is something that tells the other sharks, and at the end is something that they should come and investigate. But I had sharks with hooks that I never seen before in my life showing up on the dive only when I start removing hooks. I don't do the entire dive trying to remove hooks. I have dives where I do interactions and when I work with guests and divers. And then at the end, most people allow me to work with the hooks because they want to see how it works. And the
Yeah.
moment I start working with hooks, shark with hooks that I never seen before show up.
So cool. So
It
cool.
is.
Wow. It's exciting. It's funny. So I work with bamboo sharks, significantly smaller than what you work
Oh,
with.
they're so cute.
But people, when I tell them, they're like, "Oh, aren't you scared?" I'm like, "No, they're like the biggest little babies. They just come and like nudge your knee and be like, 'Hey, I'm here. You want to feed me?'" And like they let you pick them up and hold them like babies, and just I don't know. They get misunderstood.
Well, I think that the major issue with that is the moment you say shark, everybody thinks, Jaws. And, I had people saying, well, when you hit the water, you are shark food. And I keep trying to tell people, like, well, not necessarily. I said, if I hit the water and underneath me, there's nurse sharks, either they're going to ignore me or they might perceive me as a predator. So it doesn't mean that every time I hit the water and there's a shark in the water, the shark is going to go, oh, yeah, food, that's food. It's on the surface. I'm going to eat it. Um, if it is a tiger shark, it might perceive me as food because they feed on turtles on the surface. But we need to start dissociating ourselves from saying sharks this and sharks that. There's so many species of sharks. There's 8 orders of sharks, right? So 8 orders of sharks. In those 8 orders, there's over 520 species. So it's like saying, "Oh, aren't you afraid of sharks?" And I'm like, well, if you're talking about the lantern shark, which is the size of a pen, no. If you're talking about a tiger, I'm not afraid. Am I behaving differently than diving with bamboo sharks? Absolutely. But
Yes.
this is what you would do if you're dealing with a cat or with a tiger.
That's true. That's very true. I think this year for Shark Week, I tried to focus on like all of the small, like cute little bitty sharks. Just, I mean, I feel like Shark Week as it's portrayed, I'm not the biggest fan of it because I feel like there's a lot of misinformation out there. And there's a lot, like you said, a bunch of other species out there that don't get featured, that people don't know about. So I'm like, all right, you know what? There's a shark out there. I have a friend that's a huge octopus fan. He's like, there's an octopus that everybody can love. You just got to find your octopus. And I'm like, you got to find your shark.
And I have to agree with you. A lot of people ask me, oh, why you're not on Shark Week and all of that. Is the problem with Shark Week is that they have the potential to be the biggest ambassadors for sharks. And there's a lot of people that watch Shark Week and become enamored with sharks. But there's a lot of people that watch Shark Weeks and Shark Week, and all that they feel is the um, confirmation of their fears, because the sharks are always shown. There's only so many species that they show. Yes, every once in a while they do something else, and they always show them in a certain specific behavior, to the point that I had people texting me, emailing me, sending messages on social media saying, oh, but I don't see the teeth. And I'm like, no, sharks don't swim around the ocean just with their gaping jaws trying to bite everything. But these people are so used to see air jaws and biting makos and biting this and open, the tiger swimming away with the camera, that they don't realize that actually the average shark swims around the ocean with the jaws slightly open just to ventilate.
Yeah.
And so they miss the mark. They miss the mark because they have the potential to do so much good for the sharks. They benefit from the sharks.
Oh,
They benefit from the sharks. They make a ton of money, and the people that go and do these programs make a ton of money out of the sharks, right? Sometimes not bringing actually any money into the country that hosts and protects the sharks, including the Bahamas, because they come in with their foreign vessels on their foreign liveaboard and all of that. And then on top of that, they do a disservice to these animals. And I'm like, what happened to all the other? What about the wobegons? What about the port Jackson? What about the goblin? What about the six scales? What about, and then there's like all these species: the lantern shark, the dogfish, the bamboo shark, like you said, the zebra shark. I mean, and I can keep listing. And but they're not sensational. They don't have the gaping jaws. They I can't put, I have a little bamboo shark and put the music. Ta-dum, ta-dum. I mean, you can try, but and they're doing a huge disservice to the community and to the sharks that so much provide for all these people that are involved into these programs. And I agree with you. For as much as a lot of people are attracted to sharks, and Shark Week has some positive input, they could do so much more, so much better.
yes,
And
absolutely.
another thing, as women, and this year has been a big discussion about Shark Week, they do a huge disservice to women, and women also in minorities. So minorities in general, and then women as a whole. So white women and women in minorities, because they portray 90% of male white scientists, and they do a huge disservice about everyone else that is out there working and studying sharks, and preventing people from having that as an example. It's like, oh well, there's no women working with sharks. It's all.
Oh,
And it's like, no, actually, there's a 60% of women actually involved into shark science. So ocean science is 60% fueled by women. So there's a lot of points that we could discuss about that. But
it would be an interesting discussion. I absolutely agree. When I did and helped with the research in college, like I think every single time that I went out and helped, it was all like it was women. It was their projects, their PhD, their thesis. So like yes, there were guys in it, but there are women out there too.
there's men scientists, but I have quite a lot of women friends who are PhDs into shark science, into ocean conservation, into shark research. I mean, from Florida to South Africa, all the way to California and Italy, even. And it's just, and we text on a regular basis, and they're like these amazing women that live and also in these places sometimes to continue doing their work, and they are the expert of what is happening with the sharks in that specific area.
We talked about like the disservice that's been done, but you've done a lot of good personally, especially like when it comes to protecting the sharks in your area.
So when I first arrived here, the shark population was really healthy, thanks to the fact that the country does not really consume sharks on a regular basis. So they were not part of a targeted species. And in a certain way, I basked into this concept of like, well, the sharks are fine and they're doing good. But then we start hearing that people from the outside start putting pressure onto the Bahamian shark population because it was so healthy. We have over 40 different species of sharks. And so few of us at the time was, Eddie Rafael and Pedro Baranda, that they helped me out. We started to say, yes, the Bahamians might not be interested, but somebody comes in and start offering money for shark fins or for shark meat, they will go out and take it as a venue, as a commercial venue. So we started a petition. I started a petition, and I pushed out this petition. It collected about 25,000 signatures, in which he asked the Bahamian government to protect the sharks as a source of income, as a part of a source for the ecosystem and the fishing industry that is very prevalent here of the smaller species. When it reached over 25,000 signatures, the Bahama National Trust and the Pew Organization asked me to acquire my signature and make it theirs and incorporate it into a bigger, and obviously they had more resources, campaign. And in 2011, we were able to have the sharks declared protected in all Bahamian waters. So yes, I'm very happy about that. I'm very, very satisfied about the fact that all the sharks in Bahamians were protected. However, the problem is some of the sharks are migratory sharks, like some of the studies have shown. And so there are always issues with the fact that they may leave Bahamian waters and also the borders. Always they're out in the ocean. Who knows really where the line is? I mean, I'm pretty sure everybody's aware right now that there's over 200 Chinese vessels on the borders of one of the biggest world reserves, and in the Galapagos Islands, and animals do not know boundaries. So here it's a protected marine area, and 100 yards from here is not. And if the vessel is 100 yards beyond the barrier, there is a risk. So the work is not done yet. We need to expand this concept of protecting sharks. We need to expand it not just beyond the coastal waters, but even, I think, beyond the international waters. I think we need to put legislations in that protect migratory sharks like tiger sharks or whale sharks or pelagic species that are always beyond the water of a specific country into a wider consideration and conservation. We need stricter rules, let's say, in the open ocean. And that has been shown not only about the shark hunt, for example, has been shown what has happened with the oil tanker. They basically regurgitated all that oil back into, 3 or 4 weeks ago now? And it is absolutely flooding the area. And because it happened in international waters, it's kind of like this gray area. It's like, who does the cleanup? Well, it's your shore, you need to clean. And it's like, well, it's your oil.
Your company, your oil, your mess. You should have insurance to cover yourself for this.
So it brings up conversation that go in a certain way beyond what I'm capable of doing, but I think that need to be open. Sharks are protected here, right? My next job, for example, and my next goal is the sharks are protected, but what do sharks need in order to thrive? Not only survive, thrive. Well, they need food. So we also need not only to protect sharks, but we need to look into fisheries. How do we fish? For example, the Bahamas have banned long lining and drift nets. So they banned quite a lot of very negative way of fishing. Right? So we need to look into how are fisheries managed. How do we fish the species? Because if we wipe out all the food that a certain species of sharks eat, then we have that issue. We then need to protect where they go reproducing. We also need to protect where they keep their young till they're strong enough to come out in the ocean. And so in the Bahamas, one of my biggest work that ties into also the cave work is we need to protect the coastline and the mangroves. Because if you destroy all those places for the beautiful beach resort with the golf course and the sandy beach, you know, that beautiful, yes, come to the Bahamas and go to certain places. However, we need key locations where the sharks can be left doing what sharks need to do. And they need time. The thing we forget about sharks is they need time, a lot of time. They are they become sexually mature very late in life. Some species even like teenage time, like humans, 12, 15 years old. Some species 6, 7, but that's a long time to survive in the wild before you can actually leave something behind.
Oh, yeah.
Some reproduce every 2 years. Some have gestation periods that can go from a year to 2 years. And then they produce very small litters. So depending on the species, you might put in a lot of pressure. By the time you take 10 mature females out, how many thousands of sharks of their progeny have you taken out from the ocean? So you need to protect all of that. Where they go and eat, where they go and keep the babies, where they go and have the babies. And that is where I'm expanding the work on the island now.
Whole ecosystem, big picture.
A whole ecosystem, big picture. It's what is it? Think globally, act locally. And I
Yep.
always say we're an island on an island in this universe. What
Yes.
applies to an ecosystem on an island can apply to an archipelago of islands, which can apply to a continent, which can apply to the entire world. And one of the things that here it's very, very noticeable is everything is so vitally interconnected.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Okay, so now I've got some questions from my followers about sharks. So again, this one is from Sabine. Is the work that you do with your sharks, do you think that's possible to be translated to other types and other species of sharks? Even some more dangerous ones?
Well, it's a very good question. Um, yes and no. First of all, I try not to define sharks by more dangerous or less dangerous. It's just sharks have different sizes, different shapes, and also different feeding habits. So that is the things that we need to take in consideration. I'm a firm believer that one size does not fit all. So the interaction I have with the Caribbean reef sharks is allowed by the nature of the Caribbean reef sharks. They're known as a sleeper shark because they tend to actually relax on the ocean floor on their own accord. So if you have a more sedentary shark that is more localized, it's easier to work with than if you have a shark, for example, that is more nomad. There's also sharks, for example, that cannot sit still. So it would be kind of hard to be able to work with a shark that cannot sit still at the level I do. And then some shark, by the sheer size and the way they are, you couldn't work the way I do. So if somebody says, "Oh, what about great whites?" It's like, well, they live in a totally different environment. They feed on a totally different animal. Um, they have totally different sensory capabilities of their own environment and how they interact with each other. Like they don't like to congregate. They don't do that. It will be almost impossible to try to work with great whites the same way with Caribbean sharks. Could you work to a certain extent like that with bull sharks? Yes, it has been done. But at a certain point, the size dictates also what are you going to welcome in your lap. Okay.
Fair.
I can make a quick example. I can have a good relationship with a certain kind of animal, and they can learn to basically hop on me. I've seen Kevin Richardson with lions and all that. If somebody says, "Oh, can you do that with an elephant?" It's like, no. Not because the elephant is me, but if the elephant puts his front legs on my shoulders, right? So there's also things that are physical. So you can't really transfer from one animal to the other.
That makes sense. So she had another question. Do the sharks recognize you?
Yes, the shark do recognize me. A lot of people ask me, how can they recognize you with everything that you have on? Instead, think a dog. A dog can listen to my steps coming up the stairs, and I know exactly if it's someone that you're familiar with or not. So sharks have 7 senses. And they're obviously able to detect a person through all of those or whatever is down there. And one of the one we forget that they have is smell. So as humans, we can smell each other and we have that skin connection. Imagine if a shark cannot smell us, for example. So yes, they do recognize me.
Chris would like to know what your favorite shark is.
The Caribbean ray shark is my favorite shark from a relationship interactive point of view. From a physical point of view, I have a soft spot for the blue shark. I just absolutely love the blue shark. They have this sinuous long body, which is not proportionate, right? They have very, very elongated bodies and long pectoral fins. But the blue, the iridescent blue the sharks have is just absolutely breathtaking. It's one of those that I would love to be able to reproduce in a fabric if I could. Um, but they also have like a cute little secret. It's really funny when you go in the water with them. They have a little dab of gold right on the top of their head. So they're not just blue, 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 but they also have this like little shimmering gold, and it's something that is rarely captured in a picture, and you can only see when you go diving with them. So I call it like the kind of like special little secret. But yes, it's just their physical appearance that speaks to
Oh,
me.
it's pretty cool. I like salmon sharks. Like the way they look, like the photos that I've seen of them, I always just seem so cute and like happy. Like you just would give them a big hug.
Well, it's like the seven gills with like
Yep.
big jaws and
Um, so David would like to know what was your first encounter with a shark?
my first encounter with the shark was on my first open water dive, and the reason why I'm here 26 years later.
That is cool. I feel like there's a story behind it that I should give some time for you to explain.
I came here on vacation to learn how to scuba dive because the 5 destinations that I picked to go to at the time, 1994, from Italy, were not available for one reason or the other. And the travel agency offered me this discounted trip to the Bahamas, of which I had no clue. I hope my geography teacher doesn't hear me. And when I landed here, I did my course, and as soon as I went in the ocean, there were sharks. They were already here, and I had an obsession with sharks since I was 8 years old. And I was like, "You have sharks? You dive with sharks?" I mean, we're talking about 1994. It was not heard that you went scuba diving, and I was just saying, "Yeah, there's sharks diving with you all the time." And so I decided to stay so I could continue diving. Um, and continue be in the water with sharks. My plan was to stay here for a year.
One last question from our followers. This one is from Sonali. Sonali would like to know, do you offer internships? And I guess furthering her question, if somebody wants to get involved with your work that you do with the sharks, if they want to come out and take one of your courses and dive with you, how do they get involved?
So currently we're working on creating an internship. I want to create something that is meaningful and is capable of giving back. And because of the complexity of the work that I deal with, it's kind of hard to um, offer like a full internship. It's also very costly just to go out there and do what we do with the sharks. So we're working on it, and I want it to be comprehensive. I want it to be something that people come out from it with feeling enriched and having also helped out. So currently I offer courses, and there are courses that people pay for so that then the money can also contribute on the work that I continue to do. They can find everything on my website on www.CristinaZenato.com. So CristinaZenato.
All right. So if you didn't see that popping up across the bottom of the screen, I'll definitely have a link for it in the comments section. So check that out. This last question is one, I guess, for me personally. So with Waterlogged, and I may have mentioned this in the past, I've been posting every single day for the past 4 years, and I'm trying to better get my personal message across why I do what I do. And I've so much recently I've heard like, what is your why? And the reason why I do what I do is like I love all of this stuff. I love the ocean. I love the creatures in it, and it just makes me so happy, and like I get so fired up and so passionate about it, and I want to protect it. So my question for you is, what is your why? Why do you do what you do?
I love what I do, and I love where I am. And so when you love something, you want to protect it, and you want to make it safe, and you want to make it healthy. That is the why behind everything that I do. I just want to create a better world for everything that I love. And as everything is interconnected, I just want to create a better world for this island, and hopefully to expand this model to many other places.
It's pretty cool. It makes me feel good, like when hearing your why and like this whole leading up until till this point. I feel like your actions and your words do such a good job at portraying your why. So it's always exciting, and hopefully, we could get people sharing their whys and inspiring other people. And
I like that post. Yeah, that's cool.
all right, well, thank you so much, Cristina, for joining me today. This has been a wonderful, wonderful bit of time talking with you. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. If you guys are watching, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them below in the comment section or send me a message. Cristina also has a Instagram page and those websites, which will be down in the comments, but you can also see them here below. I've always wanted to do that, here below. Yeah. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking your time to talk with me.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.